Welcome to Technical Leadership Talks, the podcast that brings you advice, insights, and knowledge from industry leaders and experts on how to navigate managing in a technical field. Technical Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management, an online graduate program that trains industry professionals for leadership positions. I'm Katie, METM's digital marketer and your host for this episode. In today's episode, I interview Ryan Holt, a manufacturing, engineering, and facilities manager at Dover Precision Components. We are discussing how empathy helps establish positive professional relationships, which improves workplace culture and assists in progressing agendas. Can you just explain a little bit about your background and your experience?
Yes, sure thing. So out of high school, I went to college for about a year and a half prior to joining the Marine Corps. And I served 4 very active years in the Marines, to include a combat tour in support of the global war on terrorism. And then upon my EAS, which is an acronym, military acronym for End of Active Service from the Marines, and with a family at home, I had a wife and 2 sons, still have a wife and 2 sons.
Yeah.
I went back to school and got my first undergraduate degree, which was an associate's degree in engineering design graphics, while working full time in the oil and gas industry. After a few years of working as a designer, and with a personal goal to ascend the ladder of management, I decided I needed to move into engineering. So I went back to school and got my second undergraduate degree, which is a bachelor's in industrial engineering technology. From there, I moved into manufacturing engineering and made a quick positive impact on the organization and was rewarded with greater responsibility through that impact, and to include supervision of an operations team. And then that came along with designing and installing a value stream for a recently completed facility for the company I was at the time. So I spent a few years in manufacturing engineering, and then shortly after beginning the METM program, and with the same goal in mind to always progress and ascend in my career, moved into manufacturing operations management, and then having direct reports there. And I felt that was necessary in order to gain the experience necessary to successfully direct people in executing and sustaining business and operational processes. Now, when I was in the Marines, I led Marines, but leading Marines is a lot different than leading civilians. Yeah. In the Marines, you just say, hey, you go do this, and they know it better get done. Right?
Yeah.
And it's a little different in the civilian world. And I knew I needed that experience to help me ascend in my career. And then after some time in operations, I moved into engineering management and picked up facilities management along the way. And then in 2020, I graduated as a Fighting Texas Aggie from Texas A&M's METM program. Yeah, woo. Yeah. And then shortly after graduating, I was asked back by the program to serve as faculty. I've been with the program now, serving as faculty for a couple of years. And then aside from that, I'm currently a manufacturing engineering and facilities manager at a large global company. And then I serve as that associate professor for the METM program. For the contract and risk management course.
Yeah. Well, today we're talking about empathy. So before we get into how empathy affects professional relationships and workplace culture, can you just give us your definition of what empathy is?
Yes, I can. Empathy refers to our ability to identify and understand other people's emotions. And I believe that is developed out of a foundation of having like a sincere love of people. And I think caring for people is where it all begins. You can hone empathy, but I think it all starts with that foundation.
Yeah.
Of just having a heart for people.
So I used to be a high school teacher, and I taught a speech class to freshmen. And for 1 week, we actually covered empathy. It wasn't a speech class, it was a communications class that had a lot of speech within it. And we actually covered empathy. And I remember before I even joined this program, which this was one of the reasons this program was so interesting to me whenever I was applying for jobs, was the EQ aspect of it. But I remember teaching, you can actually learn empathy. Like some people have more of a natural inclination to be able to be empathetic, but it is something that people who don't have that natural inclination, they can actually do things to practice it and learn it. So it's just really neat.
Right.
So how were you first exposed to the idea of using empathy in the workplace to establish a healthy workplace culture?
All right. So although I didn't realize what empathy was by definition and why empathy is so critical in leadership until I went through the METM program, I did see it demonstrated throughout the organizations I was employed by prior to my time in the METM program. And whenever that was demonstrated, I wanted to do what was asked of me because I felt compelled to do it for the person who was doing the requesting. Because I felt that person had my well-being at heart and in their mind. and while doing also what was best for the organization. I didn't perform the task just because it was a request from a superior, or out of obligation because the request was in my scope of responsibility to do. Although I have done that too. I mean, because you just can't tell your boss no, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, there are different managers out there, and I think there's a difference between leadership and management. And then there are some managers that can lead, and there's some that can't. But the ones that lead make the most impact, and are able to make the most impact, and have the greater impact on you as an individual.
How would you say empathy helps in building and maintaining positive professional relationships within a workplace?
So people know that they have, whenever you have their interest at heart and care about their well-being, and that's demonstrated, and it needs to be demonstrated because a person, your employee, or if you're an individual contributor, and your role is to influence somebody, they're not gonna, which empathy is a big part of influencing. They're not going to be able to feel that empathy. You have to demonstrate that. But whenever you do that, positive relationships naturally occur. Yeah. And additionally, this is true for managers and with direct reports, also as individual contributors, as I just had mentioned, and because there are individual contributing roles out there to where they need to influence people. It's also good. I mean, empathy just within a team environment, empathy is crucial, and the demonstration of that is crucial because happy employees are more productive employees, and employees that are not so happy aren't usually as productive, right?
Right.
And because they're always preoccupied, thinking about stuff, and just
probably looking for a way out already.
Right, correct. So even if you don't have an influencing role that's specific within an organization, and you're just you're an individual contributor on a team, it's still important to help maintain a good team atmosphere.
Could you provide an example from your own experience where empathy played a crucial role in resolving a conflict or improving collaboration within a team you've worked on?
Certainly. So onboarding with a new team as a new manager and getting that team to accept your direction as a new manager. Yeah. And there will always be rough spots with new teams, as there will always be change. However, empathy can certainly help in smoothing over existing rough areas and help to prevent new conflict from arising due to that change. It's whenever people in general have been doing the same thing over and over and over, it gets ingrained, which actually Daniel Goleman talks about in his book, Emotional Intelligence, which I'll reference later on. And sometimes that stuff needs to change for whatever reason. And since it's so ingrained in the mind, whenever it breaks, that habit of you doing that same thing needs to break, which it does in order for change to evolve or to take hold. It can create a negative reaction. And empathy can help smooth that over with that person or persons, as long as you can demonstrate that hey, I've got your best interests at heart, and I'm balancing that with what we need to do for the organization here, and know that I care about you.
I've noticed, even like, as I said, I used to be a teacher and I had to deal with hundreds of teenagers. As soon as they knew that you cared about them, you're coming from a good place, they were so much more inclined to listen and understand where you were coming from. So I was dealing with teenagers, but it's incredible to see how that still affects adults and the workplace the same way. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to fake too.
So, for sure.
It's people can catch on real quickly. And
especially teenagers.
Right. If it's sincere and coming from the heart, it's all good.
I agree. Okay, so what strategies or practices have you found most effective in fostering a culture of empathy between you and the people you work with?
Okay, so number one, I begin every morning, making it a point to swing by my guys' desks and tell them good morning and shake each of their hands.
Yeah.
And actually, where I picked that up from was earlier. There's a previous question about when were you first exposed to the idea of using empathy in the workplace. So this is I picked this up from an instance from one of those companies I worked at. My manager there, who's also the president of the company, it was my first job out of the Marine Corps. He always made it a point to come by, no matter who you were. I had recently started there, and I came out of the Marines. I didn't have very much experience there. He had a heart for Marines. His son had just went into boot camp. He hired me on there. No matter who you were, he would come by and shake your hand and tell you good morning. And that really, really spoke to me. And I felt that it was sincere. That was years upon years ago. And that has stayed with me up till now. And I do it.
Now you do it, yeah.
Because I know how it affected me, and it meant a lot, and it has an effect on my team, and it means something to them whenever I come by and do that. And I care about them, and showing that I care about them. Also, I make it a point to check on the personal well-being of each of my employees, and sporadically, as well as in standing reviews that I have with them every week. And personal well-being is like, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing emotionally? How's your family doing? Why I ask those things is, yes, it shows them that care about them, and that everything we mentioned before, and that I've got their best interests at heart, to know that I care about them. But it's innate. Naturally, it's within me. I'm not just doing it just to do a show. I want to do it because I legit care.
It's sincere.
Right, correct.
How do you balance the need for empathy in professional relationships with the demands of achieving business objectives and meeting performance targets?
Okay, so positive leadership helps in achieving business objectives and meeting performance targets. And empathy is probably the most critical aspect of positive leadership, in my opinion. Leadership is a process of social influence that maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. And social influence begins with empathy. So empathy, I think, is the driving factor behind it all.
That's a great way of looking at it. It's the key to it. Yeah.
Yes.
What advice would you give to other leaders who are looking to enhance empathy within their teams and strengthen their professional relationships?
So a couple of things. So number one, you can get a book. One of the books I've read was by Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. It starts off with the science behind different aspects of emotional intelligence, and then it goes into the development of those different aspects. And I think it's important to know the science behind it so that you can know what it is that may create a reaction in you in a certain environment that you may be put in, or team members of yours may be put in. There's another couple of books that he's written. Another one that I read was Social Intelligence. Both are great books, and I recommend those for any leaders who are looking to get more involved or learn a bit more about empathy or emotional intelligence in general. The second thing is that they can do team buildings that consist of volunteer work at Boys and Girls Clubs, or a soup kitchen, or partner with the church and participate in community outreach initiatives, and where less fortunate people are cared for. And I think that really helps develop empathy in a team setting, because your team has to work together to care for these people, no matter if it's children at the Boys and Girls Club or adults at a soup kitchen that are involved in whatever initiative a church is doing for outreach. I think both of those, the books and then the team buildings in which you're doing volunteer work, are both great ways to help enhance empathy within team groups.
And then the last question is, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share on the subject before we wrap up?
Yeah. So here we were talking about empathy and just in the workplace. And I think empathy has more than just a place in the workplace. It has a place in the world in general. Empathy can help make you a better spouse, make you a better parent, make you a better friend. And if the world had a bit more empathy, it'd be a much better place, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
With it.
I was reading exit surveys today of the MTM class that just graduated, and one of them had a really sweet note about how the program helped his relationship with his wife and his family in ways he didn't even know that it could improve. So I thought that was a really neat note to read this morning.
Right. So I can attest to that, because as I mentioned, I went through the program, and it helped me become a better. As I mentioned, I've got a wife and I've got 2 sons. There are a few classes that are specific to EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. In the program, we always try to use that in every class, because there are a couple of classes that, especially with the decision-making class, where we would use the DISC assessment, and then in group settings, we would pair people up that had different assessments, right, correct. And which is extremely good and important. So it's good at an individual contributing team level, but it's extremely important as a manager, because as a manager, you're going to have different. We're not all cut up by the same cookie cutter, right? And you're always dealing with different personalities, and you know how to deal with those personalities, which is something that we try to promote within the program there. But through my time in the program, there was a personal change in myself, and my wife picked it up, my sons picked it up, with learning what EQ is, and then with guidance on how to develop that. It changed me, and I became a better father, husband, and better friend.
That's great.
So those words I just spoke here, the last question were from personal experiences.
Yeah, I love that. It's so great. Thank you for listening in to today's episode. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management. To learn more, visit metm.tamu.edu.